Welcome back to Light the Fuse, the only encyclopedic Mission Impossible podcast on the internet. This is Drew Taylor, once again joined by Charles Hood.
Hello.
And you just heard the music of Kevin Blumenfeld, our friend, our enemy. He's...
Enemy?
Well, he's an enemy of the people.
He's an enemy of the courts.
Yes. Because,
he might be in trouble.
Yeah, because I mean, it's legally, is it legally dissimilar?
I think it's legally different enough from the Mission Impossible theme that I think he's going to be okay. Let's hope.
Okay. Just before we start on this great episode with Mark Bristol, who is a genius storyboard artist and has a long history with Christopher McQuarrie, I wanted to remind everybody that we are on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, SoundCloud, Google Play, and more platforms soon. If you guys could subscribe, rate, and review, it would be hugely helpful for us. And be sure to visit us across all social media platforms at LightTheFuse-Pod. And that's it. Without further ado, here's our interview with Mark Bristol. This week we are so thrilled to be joined by the amazing Mark Bristol, who contributed storyboards and pre-production artwork for both Rogue Nation and Fallout. Mark, thank you so much for being on Light the Fuse.
Well, hey, it's an absolute pleasure, guys. I really appreciate it.
So, how did you start on this crazy Mission Impossible whirlwind? We would love to hear just that story.
Well, actually, it goes back 20 years ago to my hometown of Austin, Texas. I traveled from Los Angeles, which at the time was my home, to the Austin Film Festival in 1995. And I had recently seen The Usual Suspects, and just happened to be thumbing through the magazine section at the LAX airport and happened to see in one of the trade magazines, like top talent under 30. They had a photograph of Chris McQuarrie. And I was just in such awe of that film. And I just happened to see a photograph, so I knew what he looked like. And came to the Austin Film Festival, and there was a party at the Paramount Theater. And I just happened to see him standing against the wall upstairs. Nobody was talking to him. And if you know Chris McQuarrie, if you get him talking, you'll be there, for hours, enjoying every syllable. And so I just, I'll never forget this moment. Standing there going, just go talk to him. Just what can it hurt? And I just went up and introduced myself and said, what a huge fan I was of The Usual Suspects. And we just started talking. And as you know, once Chris gets going, we were off and running. So we had a really great time hanging out at the festival. And then I knew he was staying at a nearby hotel. And so I did a drawing of Kaiser Soze. And it said that Mark Bristol is a personal friend of mine. And you need to call him when you get back to Los Angeles. Otherwise, there will be consequences. And I left it at his hotel, and they delivered it to him, and he just thought that was fantastic. Anyhow, he called me up when we got back to Los Angeles. We got to be friends, and then we did... Actually, the first thing we did was Alexander the Great with Roger Deakins, and then we did The Way of the Gun, and then a long period of time where we were off doing our own thing, and then we came back together. Briefly, I designed the poster for the Full Metal Bitch in Edge of Tomorrow, and that got our creative sort of relationship back together. And then I couldn't have been more thrilled when he invited me to do Rogue Nation. So there's the long answer of collapsing 20 years of our creative friendship and interaction together.
What is the Alexander the Great Roger Deakins project?
Was that the Baz Luhrmann?
No. Oh, no. This was before. So, so hold on. Let me go back.
So Roger Deakins is, if anybody doesn't know, is an amazing cinematographer who's done most of the Coen Brothers movies. He did Sicario recently and
Blade Runner 2049, and
won the Oscar finally for Blade Runner.
Yeah, so Chris had developed this magnificent script, and Roger was attached to be the cinematographer, and so we mostly met at my house in Venice and designed the whole movie. And unfortunately, it never came together. I know it's one of Chris's fabled dream projects.
Oh, wow. Okay, well, next time we talk to Chris, we're going to have to grill him about that.
As long as it doesn't, bring up too many bad memories. But, I'm sure it's still in the hopper somewhere. But, yeah, it was just magnificent, to get together and to work with Roger Deacon's, already such a huge fan and such a humble, wonderful artist. So it was super cool.
Can you talk to us a little bit about when you're brought in, how you're utilized, and, you look at the storyboards, so many of them are shot for shot what ended up in the movie, which is sort of amazing considering how kind of run and gun these movies are. So I was just curious as to what that process is like.
Sure. And I'm not exactly sure what you mean by run and gun because they're incredibly precise. We plan these things 6 months ahead of their actual shooting. With every single shot that goes into these massive action scenes like the helicopter sequence, it's just, there's so many departments and so many meetings and so much that has to be, approved, and the safety that goes into every single shot. So, the last thing you can do when you get to New Zealand is show up and not have an exact plan of every single shot, every single location. When you have 6 helicopters in the air and Tom literally risking his life to achieve these shots. Again, the reason for the storyboards is to be the first step in the process of Chris articulating his vision that then is translated to the rest of the crew and then getting their feedback. I make adjustments to the boards based on any department head's feedback. And Chris and Tom, they laugh about this sometimes because when, like on Rogue Nation, when Chris and Tom say, well, what if you're hanging on the side of a plane, as just a spitball idea? Wouldn't that be cool? And then you have all these incredibly talented, the best of the best, individuals that look at that crazy idea and go, yeah, I think we can do that. So you have the budget, and you also have the best people in the industry that are really vetting these incredible ideas. And then once it's gotten past that process, then Chris and I will dive in. And, I'm usually one of the first people that he hires on the process, which to me is just couldn't be a greater thrill and honor. I'm invited to his creative table very, very early on both Rogue Nation and on Fallout, as he and Tom are exploring ideas, all these different avenues of ideas and potential action sequences and potential. And the drawings help everybody to get an immediate feedback on its potential. Or it's just, again, it was a bad road that we walked down, and we turn in a new direction. And so it's just an exciting process to see Chris starting to, take all of that in and all his, further discussions with Tom. I mean, the two of them are such an incredible creative team. And then, Chris starts putting, his fingers to the keyboard and starts typing up the story. And, so the closer we get to actual pre-production, we've already explored so many ideas and it just gets him closer and closer to the true story that he's going to embark on. And so, again, another very long answer for your question, but
it's great.
That's
exactly what we want to hear.
Pre-production on a Chris McQuarrie Mission Impossible.
And you talked about going down roads that then you have to turn back and go, a different way. On your website, you have some storyboards from Fallout that were not in the final film from the helicopter sequence in the climax. There's one storyboard that looks like someone jumping off of a cliff that's falling apart onto a helicopter. Was that Ethan jumping onto a helicopter from the cliff?
Those early explorative ideas, that Chris knew it was going to be set in, somewhere in Tibet, Nepal. We didn't quite know where. We knew there was a helicopter, chase. As you see in some of those drawings, it was a gunship that was chasing him. There was another character with Ethan at the time that eventually went away and eventually became Henry Cavill's character. So again, those are just all the explorations. The one thing out of that whole exploration that survived was the fog bank. Ethan, diving into the fog bank to evade the enemy. So again, it was worth it just for that.
Well, what's incredible is so many of the storyboards that you've done, and we'll post some of them on social media, and we'll give everybody the address for your website you can come check out. But so many of the images are exactly what ended up in the movie. I mean, the halo jump is amazing. The Tom Cruise hanging out of the side of the plane at the beginning of Rogue Nation. And there's a great quote from Christopher McQuarrie on your website that's every sequence in Rogue Nation had its own unique complications. In every case, their execution relied heavily on Mark Bristol's artwork. His understanding of what I see in my head borders on an invasion of privacy, which is amazing. But I also wanted to ask you about the opera sequence for Rogue Nation. You drew storyboards for that, and it was originally for IMAX. So were you drawing IMAX storyboards, and then when they changed because the aspect ratio is different, obviously, for IMAX. So did you have to adjust when they decided to not shoot in IMAX? Did they, for the storyboards? Or just talk about the opera sequence in general?
Yeah, so, with any Mission Impossible action sequence, you're on it for many, many months. I think probably for the opera sequence, I think, all told, I probably spent 4 or 5 months on it. Now, that's not always straight. You'll work on a version of it. As you see, there are storyboards that are in IMAX. And then, I got to go to Vienna with the team and tour the opera house, which again enables Chris and myself, to walk the space. Geography is incredibly important to Chris, and especially in a place as massive as that, with so many labyrinths and you've got to get an understanding of the space as he starts to put the story together. And so being there with him on locations is very vital once we get to that stage of our development on the visuals. And so I went to Vienna twice, and so there are multiple iterations of the storyboards that eventually make it into the final set of storyboards. And so some of the storyboards still survived, though they were in the IMAX aspect ratio. Reason being is at the beginning of Rogue Nation, more of the sequences were considered for IMAX, and for reasons I'm not aware of, went away. And so, but just for economy, I just kept them in there. The crew, understood, obviously we're framing for something different than what's shown, but it wasn't necessary for me to have to redraw. Now, on some, I did redraw on some, like on Fallout, for some of the sequence up there at Pulpit Rock, once they've crashed onto that incredible rock cliff face. Again, we had, different portions of it were originally planned for IMAX, and I did end up redrawing those to a 2:40 aspect ratio just for clarity. The goal of the storyboard, every director is different. Some directors, the storyboards are a loose roadmap to follow, to be changed once the actors are there, and you're blocking things out with the actors. And of course, Chris does that in all of his narrative scenes. But, for these action scenes, like I spoke about in the very beginning, so many departments, so many meetings are going into almost every single shot that it makes sense to storyboard them, and that the storyboard should match the final film, because so many people depend on a vision that can be followed all the way through to the final film. So it makes sense on this type of movie that the storyboards are going to match the final film so well. And for me, that's an unbelievable thrill. It's quite awesome. Seeing the movie for the first time is just, it brings you to tears. You're just so excited and proud.
Well, you talked about going to the opera house. Are you on location for a lot of, there's storyboards from the Parisian chase that have railings of buildings and things. I mean, are you on location early on? Do you go on those location scouts with Chris, or how does that work?
Well, I'll just quickly kind of walk you through the whole process. So I'll tour all the locations on the Tech Scout, which is where all the department heads go, and they tour everything, and it's where Chris really locks in with the team and his cinematographer on exactly what they want. We'll see 5 roundabouts, and he'll finally make a decision on which roundabout. Then I'll be there to take a multitude of photographs, and I'm always shadowing Chris. I'm always right next to him. And, when there's a moment when he's free, I'll say, okay, how do you want to shoot this? We've discussed it many times. Maybe I've already done versions of it in a storyboard. And then now that we're actually standing on a location, then it becomes all very clear. So he can walk me through it. Okay, this is how I see this action playing out. And I'll do my little quick thumbnail sketches with a ballpoint pen, just drawing out the sketches of each shot, taking my notes, right? And then I'll go back, we'll set up another meeting, we'll sit down, we'll talk about the whole Paris motorcycle chase, We'll go through it. Usually Rob Hardy is there, stunts are there. And then after I've gotten everybody's input and we've gone through all the thumbnails, I've designed all the shots, then I'll go back to, if I'm in Paris, to my hotel room where I've set up my little, my sort of portable drawing space, and I've got all the, location photographs, and I've gone and taken photographs of the motorcycle, and, I pull in every single resource as possible because again, I want those storyboards to be as exacting as possible so that the crew knows exactly what Chris is after. And so it's very important to me that they match as exactly to the location and the lenses, etc. So, and then once the storyboards are delivered to Chris, we'll have, another meeting. He may say, this angle's not quite right. Adjust this over to here. I'll take my additional notes. Then I'll do another pass. Then once he approves it, then it goes out to all the department heads. And then there'll be follow-up meetings where we'll all go through the storyboards. And this, again, is why they're so important on a movie of this scope and scale. And sometimes, again, like on the helicopter sequence, I would purposely draw many more angles than we knew we would actually shoot. But it gave us a chance to talk about them and, no, this one, yes, this one, no, that one. Then I'll go back and make another version of the storyboards that are the final approved boards that, go back out to the entire crew. Usually at that point, I'll go off with the previs team and start turning it into a previs. And then on set, they'll use the previs / storyboards to achieve the final film.
You mentioned before that different directors have different styles. And I know that some Mission Impossible fans might not want to hear this, but I want to ask you, because I am a huge Terrence Malick fan, I have to ask you how you got involved with The Thin Red Line, and also what were the storyboards you were doing for Tree of Life and when that started as well.
Oh my, okay, so yeah, all right, we'll quickly divert from Mission, and this is actually a very funny story. I'll tell it as quick as possible because I know we're here to talk about Mission Impossible, but I had just moved from Austin, Texas to Los Angeles, and I told myself at that early stage in my career, I was like 25 or something, no more low-budget films, no more student films. I'm only going to work on, the big movies. I get there, and maybe about a month after I got there, I got this delightful phone call from this wonderful man. He was putting this little movie together, and he'd seen my storyboards on Emilio's film, and I asked him, well, have you directed anything before? And he said, oh, I've done a couple things. And, in my mind, I compartmentalized him into this low budget, no experience filmmaker from Texas. Everything that I had, disavowed and was wanting to move away from, he was checking all those boxes. And I didn't recognize the name.
At this point, he hadn't made a movie in 20 years, right?
Exactly. And so I would have been 5, I think, when, his last movie came out.
Days of Heaven.
Days of Heaven, thank you. And about 2 months go by, and he calls and he leaves a message saying, "Oh, I'm coming out to Los Angeles. I'd love to meet." And again, I'd kind of blown him off, and so I didn't really get back to him, which is just ridiculous. But he called again. I'll be in Los Angeles next week, and I'd love to get together. And so I called a friend of mine, and I said, who was a Texas filmmaker. I'm like, hey, Cardi, there's this gentleman that keeps ringing. He says he's a director. I don't really think so. Terry Malick? He's like, Terrence Malick? Oh my God, he hasn't called anybody in 20 years and you blow him off? and then as soon as he said Days of Heaven and Badlands, of course I knew those movies. I just didn't put the name together. It's like, oh my God, So needless to say, I called Terry back, and he was, ever as wonderful and nice, and said, "Oh, I would love to do your movie, your little movie." It was still referred to as the little movie, and of course, that little movie turned out to be the Thin Red Line, and and he's just one of the most wonderful people to work with. It's working with your favorite English philosophy professor as a filmmaker. It's just it's so great. So yeah, and Terry doesn't follow the boards. I mean, the boards for that movie were for the landing sequence, and he wanted to explore violence. He wanted to have me draw some scenes from the book, that showed a head being decapitated, And once he saw it, it really affected him negatively, and it led to this whole discussion about what the level of violence in the movie should be. And then on Tree of Life, I was, so honored that he invited me back. And for that, again, at the time, he was trying to raise the finances. And so we did a couple sequences for that never actually were filmed, but we turned them into an animatic and, put music and sound and he was able to go out to investors and show what he had in mind. And Chris McQuarrie and Terrence Malick are certainly two of my, all-time favorite people to work with.
Well, I wanted to bring it back to Mission Impossible since Charles has just totally derailed the conversation.
I had to ask about Malick. I had to. Tree of Life is just a masterpiece, and so is the. He's made so many.
Absolutely, I so enjoyed watching the new extended Criterion version of that movie, and yeah, that'll be an all-time. Both of those movies, though I had very little to do with Tree of Life, but any time you get to work with Terrence Malick is a dream.
Well, you've described, this process of working with McQuarrie, but then there are things like the climax of Rogue Nation, which I'm very curious about because by all accounts that was sort of, they shut down production for a little bit and came up with that ending and shot it kind of late in the game. When they were sort of in that fallow period, did they call you for storyboards? Did you have anything to do with that sort of final sequence with putting Lane in the box, or had you sort of gone off the project by that point?
Yeah, so at that point, I had gone off the project, but inevitably, they always call you back. When you think you're out, they pull you back in. Of course, anytime Chris calls, no matter what I'm doing, I'll find a way to work his material in. So actually, while he was still trying to figure out the ending, they had me storyboard a completely different ending and scouted it, and it was a part of that whole process of feeling like you had to make it bigger and more, had to outdo the hanging on the side of the plane. They kept going for bigger, and finally he and Tom realized, no, just listen to the story. What does the story say it should be? And it ultimately became that wonderful character drama and a much simpler but much more satisfying payoff. So we storyboarded some other versions of it very quickly because they needed to see the board. So at that point, I was literally just drawing with a blue ballpoint pen just as fast as possible because they needed feedback on it very quickly because obviously the clock was ticking.
What were some of those, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm not going to say because the thing about Mission is some of the ideas that you don't use find their way into other films, other missions. So we kind of put them in our back pocket, and so I just can't say.
Okay.
That's the marvelous thing about Chris. I mean, there's so many great things about him, but he is such a phenomenal storyteller. And everything, and Tom is as well. I mean, they're such an amazing team. And they trust each other so well. And Chris, on these massive films, it just always comes back to story and character. He has such an amazing team that can help him to deliver these action sequences, but he's always thinking of how does it relate to story. And so the ending of Rogue Nation is just a great testament to, he doesn't care about the next big, massive, tentpole action scene. What's right to tell the story, and ultimately, it came back to that, and that the team is family, and Benji at risk, and then Lane in a box, as simple as that, and it worked.
In 5 movies, if the scene shows up, the original Climax, Rogue Nation, you have to tell us then at least that was it.
Yes, I will. Absolutely.
Okay, great
Deal.
Well, Mark, for Charles, I just want to thank you for coming on the show and talking to us about all of these amazing experiences. And I think it's great that we're showing people what a huge contribution you've made to these movies. And I hope you're going to be along as part of the Mission team for as long as they make these things.
Well, guys, I so appreciate it. Storyboards is often a very quiet, humble, behind the scenes. You are there specifically to aid, in the vision of the director that you're working with. And so we rarely come out from the shadows to speak about our craft. incredible artisans all around the world that are doing what I do. And yes, I could not be luckier to have walked up to Chris 20 years ago and shook his hand. The fallout from that moment has been incredible. Making these movies is as much fun and is as much an adventure as watching them, and I could not be more honored to be a part of his team.
All right. Visit markbristol.squarespace.com. There are some really amazing things on there, but not the original ending of Rogue Nation, so we just have to deal with that.
You just have to imagine what it could have been.
Yes, that it's locked away in a Taurus somewhere in Morocco.
We're going to break it.
We'll break it. Well, again, thank you so much, Mark, and hopefully we'll talk to you on the next one.
All right, you guys are awesome, and thanks for the invitation.
And we're back. That was our great interview with Mark Bristol. We were incredibly nervous about taking up too much of his time, so we didn't get in, my favorite question that I have to ask everybody is ranking the movies, and we forgot to ask him. So we
followed up with an email.
We sent him an email, and Charles is going to officially reveal Mark Bristol's top 3 Mission Impossibles.
So should I count down from 3?
Count down from 3.
Okay, Mark Bristol's number 3 is Ghost Protocol.
Wow.
His number 2 is Rogue Nation.
Okay.
And his number 1 is Fallout. So he says, it's rare that in a series the movies just keep getting better, and can't really argue with him. I mean, we love the first movie a lot, but that's what I love about people's opinions here. They're so wildly different.
Yeah.
This is wildly different than Lauren's top 3, and wildly different from Eddie's. We didn't get one out of McQuarrie.
McQuarrie just told us to straight up go to hell, and he had every right. He had every right.
Yes, he's earned it.
He's earned it. So before we say goodbye, I just wanted to remind everybody to subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening to it, rate and review it, and reach out to us on our various social media platforms at LightTheFuse-Pod, and visit the website at LightTheFusePodcast.com. For Charles, this is Drew, thanking you once again.
Bye. Thanks again for listening, everyone. And before we go, another mission, should you choose to accept it. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. And remember that you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at LightTheFusePod, and email us questions or comments at LightTheFusePodcasts@gmail.com. If you'd like to watch the original Mission Impossible television show, all 7 seasons are currently available to stream on Amazon Prime. This message will self-destruct in 5 seconds.